We have total intolerance for anybody that doesn't fit into our white English box.
Do you think the Labour Party has a problem with anti-Semitism?
Depends what you mean by problem.
I do. I think it's pretty clear, really. It's an historic problem. I think they've had it for many years.
I think they've got a problem with how they deal with racism, it seems. It seems to be divided between different kinds, and I think actually they ought to pursue a policy of treating all racism the same.
I believe that the categories are too tight. And historically, I don't really believe that Labour has had a problem, actually, with anti-Semitism.
Yes, I do. I think it's been a problem for a very long while, and despite the so-called effort by Starmer, he always seems to be last in doing something about it. And like this time, it's been in the papers, everybody knows about it, and then he decides to do something about it.
Perhaps it's a connection with left-wing politics and being anti-Israel, seeing Israel is supported by the United States as they see it. Therefore, anything that the United States supports, they're against.
Well, it's a big organisation. There are always going to be some people in any group of more than about 3 people with dodgy views on any subject. Labour Party is a relatively wide church, so I expect there are some anti-Semitic people in the Labour Party. I think there are probably just as many in the Tory Party, so it's not a deciding issue for me which I vote for if those were the 2 options.
Keir Starmer says that he's changed the Labour Party. It's now a changed party, since Jeremy Corbyn's era. Do you agree with that?
Well, I don't think this latest issue helps him. I think he needs to show that the Labour Party are, if anything, coming towards the centre of the road, which they've got to do. Corbyn took them over to the left too much, and it worries people.
There's going to be a few people anywhere who could be described as pretty well anything under the sun. Jeremy Corbyn was photographed in front of a mural somewhere with a perceived Jewish figure in it. That could happen to anybody. I probably walked past something today which would identify me as anything you like. White supremacist, anti-Jewish, anti-Muslim, anti-Red Indian. So that on its own was not a big deal. There are other claims which I couldn't tell from my relatively close reading of the newspaper whether they were true or not. I know certain courts or organised people found him or thought they were guilty of anti-Semitism. I never particularly felt Jeremy Corbyn was. It didn't strike me as his style.
There are factions in the Labour Party, particularly in the last, say, 10 years, which are very much pro-Arab, pro-Palestinian in particular, and therefore anti-Zionist, which is anti the state of Israel generally. And that is a different matter, but because Jeremy Corbyn did such a careless job of looking after that particular debate, it's got blown up as a political football, and he should have really handled it then. Keir Starmer and the others have been left with a pretty bad legacy, and it's very hard for them to be convincing.
We saw with Keir Starmer, he was in support of Israel defending itself. They voted against a ceasefire. Do you think that Labour's taken a more pro-Israel stance in this current conflict?
Yes, they have, but of course they're in danger of losing their supporters for the other side, obviously, those who support Palestine and the Palestinian state. They're in a cleft stick, as it were.
I think he should call for a ceasefire. Okay, maybe not at first. We wanted to show support after a heinous attack. But now, there's no question, there should be a ceasefire as soon as possible.
Discussion around the Israel-Gaza conflict. Do you think that it's become such a polarised subject that it's quite difficult to have nowadays?
Well, the way it's been approached by some people here, you really can't afford to open your mouth about it whatsoever, because whether you for one side or against another side. There's going to be your neighbour that's going to take offence and may react very badly. And that again goes back to our intolerance for anything different. And I really don't know how to change it. There doesn't seem any particular movement. I think the women need to do it because that's where it comes from, because the men always resort to violence. But there doesn't seem to be that movement from what I can see from women at all. They are just going along with the status quo and don't bother me. I'm okay, so don't bother me.
Well, I don't know the statistics, and you'd have to look them up, but I get the impression that possibly the Labour Party has more Muslim MPs and Muslim councillors, perhaps, I don't know. But if that's true, then that would increase the likelihood of people within the party having an anti-Israel stance.
Do you think that that translates into anti-Semitism?
Possibly, yes. If you've got a conflict in Gaza now between the Israeli state and the Palestinian state, which is a Muslim state, you're bound to have that being an issue.
Would you say that this issue's been overinflated then?
Yeah.
There has been a significant rise in anti-Semitic attacks in the UK since the October Hamas attacks. What are your thoughts on that? Do you think that perhaps, MPs should be held to a higher standard about the language that they're using around these topics?
Well, I think they should always be held to the highest possible standards and be extremely careful not to release words which can be a danger to other people or communities. I don't know, we don't have from the police a description of who's causing the attacks in England, in London, in Britain, against Jews. It could be a whole host of people. It could be Muslims who have extreme views. It could be far-right parties who have extreme views. It's unlikely to be a lot of the people who went on those marches in London pro-Palestinian, because on the whole they're tending towards the Guardian reading liberals, I would guess. I'm guessing, I don't know.
I think we have become more intolerant of our neighbours. It doesn't matter who it is. There's something that we seem to look for to criticise. And if you don't agree with me, well, you're in trouble. And there seems to be a lot of frustration, a lot of anger, and people are just lashing out. We just don't tolerate our neighbours, and I don't mean other countries, which we don't very badly, but also just our actual neighbour here living next door to us. Perhaps if they're coloured or a different religion, different sex, there's that problem as well that raises it. We have total intolerance for anybody that doesn't fit into our white English box.
Oh, I think it's appalling. I mean, no right-thinking person with any compassion and humanity can not think it's appalling. It's just outright hatred of one tribe by another, but expressed publicly, which can never be a good thing.